Chapter 4, The Confession. Psycho's 11-year-old girl snapped her fingers at me. Prospect. She sucked a lollipop and pointed to a protruding nail in the deck I had just sealed. Sweat stained my armpits. My head throbbed. As much as I wanted to ignore her, Psycho was her father, and I had been a club prospect for only 3 months. As a mere probationary member, my job was to obey Psycho, even if his commands filtered through his bratty kid. She blinked at me, flipped her dark braids behind her shoulders, and skimmed her bare heel over the rusty head. Careful, she whispered. Someone could get hurt. I grabbed a hammer and glanced across the yard. Psycho huddled on a cube of brown grass near his above-ground swimming pool and conducted club business. Joined by Powder, his vice president, Sonny, his sergeant-at-arms, and another full patch, Spoon. Psycho planned to patch in Tony the Barber and Knuckles, so named when his knuckles were blown off, his right hand after he grabbed the barrel of a gun pointed at his head. Friends he had known for years, but who had never prospected. Terrible stood guard a few feet away. Psycho's girl tapped her foot impatiently. Sun dipped over the horizon and cut a thin red line through the sky. Tony and Knuckles' ceremony lasted a mere 2 minutes as Psycho handed them their colors and shook their hands. The president summoned Terrible into their circle, and the two spoke in hushed tones. Psycho's expression turned dark as if a shade had been drawn over his face. His little girl tugged on my vest. What do you want? I swatted her hand away. Terrible marched to my rescue. Quick draw, let's go for a ride. We climbed into my beater, Ford Explorer, parked on the street. Terrible slid into the passenger seat and lit a cigarette. His hand shook. He cracked open the window, flicked ash into the street. We rode in silence for several minutes. Then Terrible wagged the butt of his cigarette at me. I'm going to tell you some shit. His pronouncement thundered in my chest like foreboding. Terrible averted his gaze, stared into the black street. There was a murder last night. His words resounded like gunshot inside the car. Confessing to a gangland-style shooting was every informant's dream, and it was fast becoming my nightmare. Drug rip. I had no recorder. Terrible rattled off the co-conspirators, Sonny, Rhino, Twist, the club's enforcers, and his rogues. Shit. I wanted to slow him down, to stop talking altogether until I could get him on tape. Sonny planned the whole thing. Terrible threw the sergeant-at-arms under the bus. Sonny never showed up, but Rhino and Twist, keen on opportunities, stormed the supplier's drug house and surprised the few droppers inside. Thoughts raced in my head as Terrible spilled more details. He had planned the robbery with Sonny, but he hadn't anticipated, afraid he might be recognized by the intended target. Stop talking. No one was supposed to die, Terrible added. With shot in the back, the victim stumbled into the street, leaving a blood trail and silent witnesses. Worse, Rhino and Twist, in their haste to leave the scene, left deep tire marks, a fucking calling card. Terrible flicked his cigarette out the window. Silence hung in the air between us, and I forgot to breathe. We need to clean up his shit, he said matter-of-factly, almost forgetting the reason he had asked me to drive in the first place. I drove to Twist's house in Apple Valley, and a cold realization hit me. Twist could not be linked in any way to the Vagos. Murder attracted heat and unwanted attention. Psycho had ordered Terrible to remove any Vagos paraphernalia, including the murder weapon. I parked down the street and shut off the engine. Darkness cloaked us. Dutifully, I helped Terrible remove duffel bags from Twist's empty house, stuffed with club colors, bangers, flags, SWAT stickers, and handmade wood carvings engraved with Vagos insignia. At the first chance I got, I called Kaz. Can you get it on tape, he asked. My heart hammered against my chest. Surrounded by dark shapes, clad in denim and dirty patches of heat, I never felt more alone. As an informant, I had no backup, no surveillance team, no one to hear the bullet penetrate my skull if things soured. Without Twist's confession, the government had nothing but a body in the street. Only I knew the players involved, but technically, I didn't exist. I was deep undercover in the most violent biker gang in California. How was I going to entice a killer who barely knew me to confess? I secured a recorder and spent the night awake. Twist's car lay in pieces in his driveway. The dashboard in the dirt, seat cushions piled on top of one another, radio parts scattered in the rocks. He probably thinks his car is bugged, I thought. Shattered glass crumbled under my feet. I peered through the screen door. A white haze filled the entrance. Lamps formed on the floor. Flies buzzed in my ear. I knocked, and instantly a hand shot through an opening in the wall above me and pointed a 22 at my head. Jesus, Twist, I said, trying not to implode. What do you want? He barked. I could hear water shut off. Twist had punched a hole in his bathroom wall so that he could watch the street as he showered. He poked a wet head through the makeshift opening and grinned. Sorry, man. He nodded to the door. Come on in. In the thick drug fog, two women smoked meth on the couch. Barely dressed in panties and bras, they blew circles in my face and stared at me with dull cow eyes. I waded through the trash, discarded pizza boxes, overturned ashtrays, drug paraphernalia, and rat droppings, and grabbed an edge of cushion. Want some? One giggled. I still craved the drug, though I had been clean for nearly 2 years. The smell lingered in the air, seductive as candy. Adrenaline pumped through me and fired my heart to overdrive. My recorder stuck to my skin like a brand. No way would Twist confess to anything with the women present. They were stoned out of their minds. My eyes watered and I struggled to breathe. I wanted to leave. Undercover work was largely improvisation. Federal agents received some training in psychological manipulation, when and how to use electric equipment, what warning signs trigger danger, how to protect against the legal concept of entrapment, and when to ingest drugs to survive. But as an informant, I had no formal instruction. I relied on raw instinct. I had a simple plan: to visit Twist on my lunch hour, make sure his stuff had been removed, and hope Twist would offer up a morsel. I hadn't counted on house guests. No thanks, I'm working, I managed. It was a good excuse. Serving as Cycle's prospect had some benefits. The club president expected me to be sober for construction projects. Twist snapped a towel at me and gave me a big clumsy hug. He'd been up all night, juicing the God knows what else. He talked like he was full of thiopental sodium. I cringed as Twist nestled between the women and settled in for a long afternoon. With his .380 caliber pistol in his lap and his AK-47 assault rifle propped against the bedroom door, Twist smoked and bragged about the arsenal he had stashed in his closet. After 2 hours of inane banter, I stood to leave. Twist walked me to the car and I casually invited him out for a beer, though I knew he would never come. He lived as a recluse, content to get him alone in his dark cave, too paranoid and skittish to trust his own reaction with strangers. I had one last shot. Everything cool or what? His hooded eyes skimmed mine. In the stark sun, his skin had a white glaze. You know about that? He shifted, his hands clenching and unclenching. What do you know? Some bad shit happened. I hope my voice didn't vibrate. But they have no fucking clue who did it, Twist laughed. He folded his arms across his chest, a muscle in his jaw ticked. He studied me as if I were an insect he considered eating. Did you guys leave any shit out there? I gambled. Dust blew over my boots. Nothing. Twist looked past me into the street. Nothing whatsoever. We wore glasses, long sleeves, shades. Brother, it wasn't my first rodeo. You know what I mean? He winked at me. Then, incredibly, he enacted the scene. Formed his fingers into a gun, spun around and said, I operate like a machine when I'm doing business. Held his fingers close to my temple and whispered in my ear, poof. Just one shot, my throat scratched. I hoped to hell the recorder was picking up his hushed tones and that he admitted details only the cops knew. Yeah, he paused. I shot him once. It went through his heart and hit his girlfriend in the arm. Nice. I nodded, and in that moment, I could have walked, delivered the recorded confession to the ATF, and declared the government investigation was over. Not only had I confirmed for the government that the Vagos trafficked in drugs and illegal weapons, I also had established they were involved in committing homicides, the violent trademark of motorcycle gangs. I swelled with a sense of duty, of serving society. My role was no longer about self-preservation. It was about justice. In the days following the murder, Rhino disappeared only to reemerge 2 weeks later with the desperate plea, hide me. Panic laced his voice, and when I hesitated, he elaborated. Initially, Rhino fled to his mother's place, thinking it was a safe harbor. But when homicide detectives knocked on her door, hoping to question him about Twist's movements, Rhino sped for the nearest exit. Me. Initially, Rhino fled to his mother's place, thinking it was a safe harbor. But when homicide detectives knocked on her door, hoping to question him about Twist's movements, Rhino sped for the nearest exit, me. To him, I probably looked safe. No surveillance, no dopers, no obvious tip-offs. At 2 o'clock in the morning, my girlfriend sat alert on the edge of my bed, picked at the loose skin on her thumb, and watched Rhino pace, pull the shades down, and immerse us all in gloomy shadow. I hoped I hadn't made a mistake keeping her around. Rhino studied me intently. Hours ticked by in the darkness. None of us spoke, acutely aware that I had temporarily lost my connection to Kaz and to the outside world. I needed a plan. My apartment wasn't wired. The ATF thought I didn't have enough night visitors to make the exercise worthwhile. Who knew I would harbor a co-conspirator to murder? Occasionally, I flipped on my recorder, hoping Rhino might slip and leak a confession, but he never did. A gangster's code dictated that important conversations happened in the street or en route inside a car when there were less chances to record. The decision to record involved considerable risk. Intuition guided me. If a situation didn't feel right, I listened. But mostly, I hid the device inside my jockstrap. Would he come in? Kaz asked. You mean, give us Twist? If we offered him a deal? No way. Too risky. Rhino might balk at the suggestion to betray his own. His refusal could compromise the entire investigation. Let's take a drive. Rhino's eyes narrowed to slits. It was early morning. Take me to the 7-Eleven. He had arranged to meet a girl there and shack up with her for a while. Outside, he hesitated on the curb, shoved his hands into his pockets, and glanced over his shoulder, down the empty alley. A pigeon skimped the rooftop above us. Rhino slipped into the passenger side of my Ford Explorer. My mind raced as I hit the gas pedal and switched on the recorder. Twist says he's a professional, I opened, hoping I could incite Rhino to talk. Rhino stared straight ahead and balled his hands in a fist. He panicked, dog. Words tumbled out of him. It wasn't supposed to be like that. It was supposed to be a setup. But one of them decided to keep the money. You know how tweakers are, dude. I nodded. Fucking Twist. Didn't want to leave? Instead, he left deep tire tracks at the crime scene. I didn't see no reason to cap that dude, Rhino sniffed. If Twist was acting like a machine, how come we didn't get the money? He looked at me finally, his expression stone. It wasn't focused shit. I was the only focused one. Fucking son of a bitch used my gun. I could hide the gun for you. Twist studied me with interest, shoved his hands in his pockets, and stared at the fat moon above us. He stood outside near the dark street. He shifted positions. A flicker of doubt skittered across his face, and he shook his head. No need. My heart slammed in my chest. The recorder hummed in my crotch, no doubt picking up the crunch of gravel. Rhino had been the perfect decoy. While he prowled my apartment, fearful of police, Twist had carefully disposed of Rhino Janney's pearl-handled gun with the scratched-off serial number. Without physical evidence, prosecutors had nothing. Discretion wasn't Twist's strong suit. He bragged about the murder, reenacted his role, insisted he was a machine, and several months later, homicide detectives arrested him. When they executed a search warrant of Twist's home, they found one small revolver, several newspaper articles about the murder, and various Vagos indicia. Even caged, Twist could not be contained. He demanded a speedy trial, blabbed to his cellmate that this case should be fast-tracked. After all, he was a killer. After he insisted he acted alone, no one other than me knew of Rhino's involvement. But homicide prosecutors could languish for years, and with a weak government case, no physical evidence, and a jailhouse confession to an incarcerated inmate, Kaz worried that a premature trial without the benefit of my recording could compromise ATF's larger investigation and result in Twist's acquittal. The ATF could not risk a government loss, much less my exposure. Drop the case, Kaz said to the lead detective. Let him go.